Right. Thanks very much for the introduction, Jessica, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today. The legacy is the very grand title of the talk today, and it was just I'm probably not going to be able to talk about the entirety of the legacy of the site because it is a very complex, multi-period site that is probably going to give us material for discussion and debate and revisitations of the kind of issues that I'm going to talk about today. So I'm just going to give you a very, very little glimpse, essentially, into some of the highlights of especially the Bronze Age phase of the site. And yes, for those of you who hope for some medieval Rathgall today, I have to disappoint again, but I'm sure we'll be visiting that particular aspect of the site sometime soon. And I'm looking for co-authors, Matt. So just saying. So for anyone who isn't familiar with the site, Rathgall is located in the uplands of County Wicklow. We're just at the boundary to what is today the County Carlow-Wicklow boundary. And there's a bit of territorial dispute, actually, when it comes to Rathgall in the present-day landscape as well. So claims to land being made. So it is on the surface a hill fort, a multi-villaed hill fort with at its center medieval castle. And if you go there today, the site is open for visitors. It is an OPW managed site. You'll be able to walk among those lovely remains of the site. And apparently blackberry picking is one of the things that it is renowned for in the community, at least until recently. The management of the brambles has limited that a little bit. So the existence of Rathgall and its importance within this landscape has been long known and acknowledged, and especially Orpen published a number of papers about this fort that he called the Rath of the Foreigners. And Barry Raftery, who you see here, proudly launching his Trackways Through Time Corley publication, he started to get really interested in the topic of hill forts through his MA and tackled Rathgall as what seemed to be a very typical example of a multi-valid Bronze Age hill fort in Ireland. Only recently, before Raftery started to tackle the site, there was, or in the context of Rathgall, there was this growing understanding of these monuments, not as Iron Age sites, but as Bronze Age monuments. So there was a major shift happening in the early days of engagement with this site. The excavation and its rather large extent that you see indicated here on this overview plan in form of our red cutting outlines occupied Raftery and his team of volunteers and international colleagues over a good number of years, and the excavation produced a lot of evidence that augments the evidence from the visible monuments that we see in the field. So we know that Rathgall was a site of activity from the Neolithic up to the medieval and actually also post-medieval period. And we have a vast array of finds that also speak to that. Barry Raftery diligently published his findings at the site throughout the 70s in particular, and he focused on some of the kind of key elements of the site that he encountered in the beginning in particular, such as the burial evidence, this article from 1973, about a late Bronze Age burial in Ireland, being still a seminal paper because it presented the first properly recognized late Bronze Age burial in a courseware vessel, and along which we can now place many, many more recent finds, but it was really the first at the time. So His excavations and the following years of post-excavation work in the 60s and 70s were followed then by many years during which he, on his own, as a kind of sole worker, if you want, with the support of Ursula Mattenberger, the illustrator in the department in UCD, slogged away at trying to get to grips with this vast assemblage of finds and excavation documentation. And he was supported again and again throughout all of this by financial support from a variety of different agencies. This was then reinvigorated, I would say, in 2010, when the project then moved into a second phase of post-excavation work and also limited amounts of field work. And I started to get involved in this project as well, which was an honor, but also a very daunting prospect. So this phase of post-excavation work, it's hard to draw a line, actually, say where it kind of really ended. I put 2012 onto this because I think that is when Joe Guthrie, who was still in UCD at the time, kind of perhaps was still involved a little at that point, but not for very much long after. And I had moved to an institution at the time as well. So that was... And then we were very recently at the point where everything was starting to come together, and we needed to do one final push to this decade-long project. And that final push consisted of bringing the, at this point, very advanced stage through its last stages of checking and copy editing. And also, what you're going to see in a moment, to get the archives ready for submission to the respective government bodies. And this is when we turned to the Academy, to the Archaeology Legacy Grant Scheme, and I think we were one of the first projects to be awarded this particular fund. And I don't think we would ever have been able to make that very last push to get the publication and the project wrapped up if it hadn't been for this particular funding pot to apply to. So besides the finds, which we had been working on for years at this point and been preparing for submission to the National Museum by packing them in the appropriate manner, in material suitable for archiving. We had created an index, we had double-checked and cross-referenced and made sure everything was there where it was meant to be. And we have over 10,000 registration numbers from the side of Rathgall, many of them containing multiple objects. So it's a vast archive. So that had already been progressed quite far up to this point. So what we specifically applied for funding was support to get the rest of the archive, the paper archive, the digital archive, the photographic, the negatives, the digital, everything prepared for submission to the National Monument Service, so that the other part of what is the legacy of the site, besides the knowledge, the actual documentation of the excavation will be preserved for perpetuity for people to consult and to engage with. So that was done in UCD under the leadership of Conor McDermott and the guidance of Joanna Brooke and Gabriel Cooney. And it led to an inventory of about 4,500 archival items being created and, again, suitably packed, as you can see here on the screen, and everything is now awaiting its submission to the respective bodies in due course. So that is a major achievement in itself, and I think it is really satisfying and a really appropriate conclusion for such a multi-decade project, that we cannot just wrap up the publication, but also the archives and hand them over. The publication is, of course, also what we're all waiting for with bated breath at this point. It is going to appear in 2024. We're at the last stage of page proofing now. We have 600 pages, We have close to 400 illustrations, plus a variety of tables. And it is a book that isn't just written by Barry Raftery and myself, but it brings together a wide array of specialists that contribute their knowledge and insights into this wide range of periods and different types of material that Rathgall has produced. So what is the legacy then of Rathgall in terms of the Bronze Age evidence? I'm just going to give you the what's the word, Connor, what did you call it yesterday? Not the postcard version, but the sales pitch for the book or something along those lines. It is really about highlighting some of the spectacular aspects of the site in the Bronze Age and the kind of themes and topics where I think the legacy is going to lie in terms of what it can tell us about the Bronze Age. We have evidence in terms of the material culture that speak to wide-reaching international connectivity of this, what may appear today a very remote place in the countryside. It is a really interesting case study for how we see the contemporary kind of intertwining of funerary and craft activities at the site, telling us a lot about the social context of these different spheres of Bronze Age life, and perhaps a lot about cosmologies that both of these link in with. It is allowing us to track some really important changes throughout later prehistory that reflect probably societal restructuring of the communities here in this region. And I think after a long period of I should phrase this differently. The Mohan model of Bronze Age settlement organization refers really to the latter end of the Bronze Age, and Rathgall is a little bit earlier, as you will see in a moment. But I think it is, in a long time again, a model of Bronze Age landscape and societal organization that will allow us to kind of revisit those themes about how Bronze Age societies actually were organized and living and inhabiting these landscapes. And Rathgall has a lot to tell us about all of these topics. These are really the star items that you may have seen in some of our previous presentations and publications. Rathgall is famous for the presence of a type of glass that is among the earliest European produced, or that is the earliest European produced glass, probably from northern Italy and imported into Ireland, and exceedingly rare in this part of the world. We have a few finds from France, one or two beads from Britain, and then we have a group of sites in Ireland, such as Lochgar and Freestone Hill, and really importantly, Rathgall, that have produced this glass. And here, mounted in this gold setting that makes it really extraordinary centerpiece to what was probably an entire necklace consisting of glass beads made of this new and fancy European glass. And there's some tantalizing hints of perhaps there being some manipulation of the raw material at Rathgall here as well, and perhaps some glass working. The specialists are skeptical, but I like to keep my mind open. We have the import of amber, and we have also the presence of gold objects, and we're not entirely sure where that gold came from at this point in the Bronze Age, but we can certainly point to the consumption as well as possibly also the working of gold here at the site. And I'm drawing your attention to this bit of gold wire that Mary Cahill has written about in the Barry Raftery Festschrift as one of the examples that she could pull together for gold wire in the Bronze Age. The word consumption and production is really crucial to, or is a good heading for a lot of the Bronze Age material that we have in our assemblage. So courseware pottery We have about 400 vessels of late Bronze Age pottery represented here at the site, one of the largest assemblages that we have from Ireland. And there's some evidence also for shale bracelet production. I would venture also that the pottery was most likely also produced, if not on the site, in the direct vicinity. Besides the pottery and these kind of special high status gold, amber and shale objects, Rathgall is also the site of bronze working in this phase of the late Bronze Age. And I'm showing you here some objects that are used in the making of bronze objects. Here are some crucibles for the casting of our bronze. And here a burnishing stone that may have been used for the finishing of the surfaces of these objects. This overview plan over the center of the site shows you in these gray patches some of the concentrations where Raftery found the greatest amounts of metalworking residues. And what is so astounding about the Rathgall bronzeworking assemblage is not just the sheer amount of mold fragments and the objects that we can reconstruct from them, but also the array. Typically in this period in Britain and Ireland, metalworking sites tend to be specialized towards particular categories of objects such as weapons, so only sword molds at one side, spearheads at another, ornaments at another. Rathgall has it all. It has ornaments, it has tools, it has weapons, it has agricultural items. And it is really a wide array of different object types that we see represented in these, at first sight, very unassuming looking bits of pottery. So scale of materials, production and consumption, but also the type of objects are really interesting. And Rathgall is also outstanding in terms of the dating evidence this assemblage provides us between the actual extant objects found on the site, as well as the indirect representation in terms of the molds. It allows us to revisit some of the typochronological datings proposed by George Ogan and others. And we can actually say that the assemblage sits somewhere at the transition between the Middle Bronze Age and the Late Bronze Age. And rather than being represented here or representative of different phases of use at the site here, we can show through the archaeology, through the mold assemblage, and through the radiocarbon dating that these types are actually contemporary here. So we are actually grasping at Rathgall a particular chronological horizon that sits at the cusp between these conventionally derived typochronological phases of Middle and Late Bronze Age. So this 12th and 11th century well-dated horizon, one of the best dated metalworking assemblages and horizons that we have in these islands, is really going to inform research and understanding of these particular objects and their typologies throughout Ireland and Britain, I would say as well, but especially for Ireland, where most of our dating is derived from comparison with typological sequences elsewhere. The impact that Rathgall is going to have is really quite significant. I alluded to the cultural or the social context of both the burial and the metalworking activity, and that is really where Rathgall also shines. We have moved light years away from seeing Rathgall as a site of settlement in this particular part of the site anyway. But what we see is metalworking and funerary activity existing alongside each other. So we have our pink metalworking areas, and in yellow you can see here different zones of funerary activity, especially focused here on this ring ridge 2, which I'm circling here. And that is the origin also of the finding of this pot that you can see in the National Museum one of the urns found at the site here and published by Raftery in Antiquity in 1973. One of several burials within this very enigmatic ringditch too, with its forest of 1,500 stakeholes surrounding a central pyre. This was the funerary site that Raftery published initially, and what makes this funerary complex so exciting is not just this stakehole forest that we are still struggling to understand, but also the presence of this hoard of fragments of metal objects that was inserted here within this pit 31 that you see here just south of the central burial area, and gives us really interesting food for thought about the relationship of these objects and the dead at a time where normally grave goods are not a thing. So it is also one of the very few excavated hoard finds from Ireland, so a very sensational find. The central pyre, but also these pit pyres that you see here within this ring ditch and here in a larger drawing, have also recently only been recognized in Ireland. And this Rubicon, or former headland site from County Galway, is one of the key sites that allows us to tackle this really interesting group of monuments, of which we have at Rathgall a good number. So these large square pits with posts in them that are fully carbonized, and one of them located here within our funerary enclosure. So there's ample evidence for such pyres at Rathgall, both within the main part of the site, including this burial that Raftery published in the Ogenfest Schrift as Pit 119, a large rectangular pit, 3, possibly 4 posts around it as well, closed with a big boulder and accompanied by a little gold ring, which always kind of evaded for him identification. Is it a burial? Is it a pit? What is it? There isn't much human bone in here. So we can now understand these as pyres that are being ceremoniously closed themselves, that are being sealed off at the end of their life cycle with these big deposits of boulders. So the kind of interplay and the contemporaneity of these two activities is really interesting for us. And this reconstruction drawing by Conor McHale is kind of visualizing what we think, minus all the areas of the unknown here in this part of the site. So we think that it is funerary activity accompanied by substantial amounts of metalworking that are the main phase of late Bronze Age Rathgall in the 12th and 11th century BC. And this is perhaps the activities of a community that had a settlement, and that's for another day, on the other end of the ridge in Knockeen, the second hill fort here in this very location. So opening up interesting ways about thinking landscape organization at this time. We have in the book also exciting chapters by Ingelise Stutz about the charcoal, the revisitation of a very extensive and substantial assemblage of charcoal samples that were obtained by Raftery back in the day and analyzed by us only very recently, and showing the foresight with which Raftery went into the excavation of the site, retaining and capturing a lot of material that allows us now to actually create a much better understanding of the site than we thought for a long time would be possible. So these themes are being developed further in the book, and I think they should give you a good impression of what will be the real legacy of the site. You know, interest in this landscape, interest